Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Once you see Natasha Howard's name, you already know. Us Fever fans, us Caitlin Clark fans, we kind of go into panic right away. We had a traumatic experience with Natasha Howard this season. So when I saw this headline with Natasha Howard receiving help from Caitlin Clark and all of this stuff, boy.
That panic, that visceral reaction, every Indiana Fever fan felt at the moment they saw Natasha Howard's name trending, alongside Caitlin Clark, because this past season left scars, and now we're staring down the possibility of running this experiment back for another year. The question isn't whether Natasha Howard is a good player. The question is whether she's the right player to put next to the best passer in WNBA history. And the numbers tell a story that front offices really don't want you to examine too closely.
So, Natasha Howard played this past season with the Indiana Fever. Ups and downs in the season. A lot of ups and downs, more downs in my opinion. I was not a fan of the style that Natasha Howard played with while being Caitlin Clark's teammate. I feel like she was trying to do too much. And we should have known when she came and was talking about winning MVP. We should have known right then and there, whoa, this ain't gonna work. We ignored that, and that falls on us. That's on us right there. We ignored that.
Right there, trying to do too much, and talking about winning MVP. Those aren't just throwaway observations. That's the entire problem distilled into two phrases. When you sign a veteran forward to play alongside a generational point guard, that veteran's job description is crystal clear. Space the floor, finish at the rim, set screens, play defense. The job description is not become the primary scoring option or handle the ball in transition. But that's exactly what happened throughout the 2024 season, and it created a cascading series of problems that the Fever never fully solved.
So here in an article, marca.com, it says Natasha Howard gets help from Caitlin Clark while staying connected to basketball at every level. All right, here it says Natasha Howard carried a heavy load for the Indiana Fever throughout their punishing 2025 campaign. You know what's crazy? Natasha Howard was one of the few people that actually stay healthy throughout the whole season, and she's like older than everybody. She was older than everybody, except for maybe DeWanna Bonner at the time, who scammed us.
So here's the gesture that's got everyone talking. Natasha Howard visited a Mississippi high school basketball program and surprised the team with Caitlin Clark's signature Kobe 5 Proto K sneakers. These retail for $490 per pair. The locker room video went viral. Howard shared it with pride, and suddenly we're all asking the same question. Does this mean she's coming back to Indiana? Before we answer that, let's talk about what actually happened with those sneakers, because this wasn't just Natasha Howard being generous with her own money. According to the article from Marca, Caitlin Clark's brand partnership helped facilitate this donation, which means there's still some level of connection, some working relationship between these two players. But a charitable gesture in February doesn't tell us anything about roster construction decisions in March.
Here we go, y'all. She enters free agency without a clear direction on whether she will return to the Fever, join a new franchise, or even continue her WNBA career. Here it says, free agency, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not trying to think about that right now. I'm going to dissect everything from this season. When that time comes, you guys will know, she said as the season wrapped up. You remember her exit interview. Natasha Howard did not sound like she was looking to come back to Indiana after everything was all said and done. And I was actually happy about that. Like, I just don't think Natasha Howard's a good fit. I don't think she's a bad person or nothing like that. I just don't think her game.
Free agency. That's where this gets complicated. Natasha Howard enters unrestricted free agency with no clear direction. In her exit interview after the 2024 season ended, she said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not trying to think about that right now. I'm going to dissect everything from this season. When that time comes." That doesn't sound like someone planning to run it back. That sounds like someone who knows the fit wasn't right, who experienced the frustration firsthand, and who's genuinely uncertain about whether returning to Indiana makes sense for her career. And here's what makes this fascinating. Both sides might be better off moving on, but neither side wants to be the one to say it publicly. Let's examine what actually happened on the court during the 2024 season, because this is where theory meets reality. Natasha Howard averaged 11 points and 6 rebounds per game, Those are perfectly respectable numbers for a veteran forward. But raw averages don't tell you about shot selection, spacing, or how a player's presence affects everyone else's efficiency.
So there you have that. And then let's just kind of take a look at her numbers. I mean, Natasha Howard, she averaged 11 points, 6 rebounds. I just feel like we can get so much better, man. I feel like we can do a lot better at the 4 spot. I think we should go all in and go get Azurá Stevens from the Sparks. I think if you're looking for a true stretch forward that has height, we're talking about a girl that's 6'6", can shoot the 3. I think that would be a great fit next to Caitlin Clark. I don't think DeWanna Bonner or Natasha Howard was ever a good fit. I mean, really think about like Aliyah Boston being a hub. Part of the reason Aliyah Boston was a hub is because her and Natasha Howard can't.
18% from three-point range. Let me say that again, because it's important. Natasha Howard shot 18% from beyond the arc during the 2024 WNBA season. That's not a small sample size anomaly. That's not bad luck. That's a fundamental limitation that defenses exploited relentlessly. When you're playing next to Caitlin Clark, the single most important attribute for a power forward is the ability to punish defenses that help off you. Clark's entire offensive system is built on creating advantages through her gravity. Defenders have to respect her three-point range from 30 feet, which means they're constantly making help decisions. If your power forward can't make them pay for leaving her open, the entire offensive ecosystem breaks down, and that's exactly what happened. Defenses quickly figured out they could sag off Natasha Howard completely. They could pack the paint against Aliyah Boston. They could send aggressive help at Caitlin Clark on every pick and roll. Because what's the worst that happens? Natasha Howard gets an open three-pointer that she'll miss 4 out of 5 times. But the spacing issue wasn't even the biggest problem. The biggest problem was shot selection and decision-making. Natasha Howard repeatedly tried to create her own offense off the dribble. She'd bring the ball up in transition when Caitlin Clark was on the floor. She'd call for isolations in the post. She'd wave off screens to go one-on-one. For a player who shot 18% from 3 and wasn't particularly efficient inside the arc either, these decisions were baffling.
You guys went and got Natasha Howard when there were other options at the 4 spot. We went and got a forward that shoots 18% from 3. It just didn't make sense. It made no sense, and this is just why we feel like we can't really trust this organization to get it right and get the right pieces around Caitlin Clark. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. If there's any way that Natasha Howard is planning to come back, I'm
malpractice on all levels. That's harsh language. But is it inaccurate? The Indiana Fever front office had an entire offseason to construct a roster around Caitlin Clark. They knew what they were getting. The most accomplished college player in history. A generational passer. Someone who would command defensive attention, unlike anything the franchise had ever seen. And their response was to sign a power forward who can't shoot. This wasn't a mid-season injury replacement. This wasn't a desperation move after other options fell through. Natasha Howard was a deliberate choice. A planned acquisition. A player the front office specifically targeted to fill the starting power forward role. Which raises uncomfortable questions about whether the people making roster decisions actually understand how to maximize Caitlin Clark's unique skill set. Compare this to how other franchises have built around elite point guards. When you have someone who can create open looks for teammates at historic rates, you surround them with shooters. You prioritize floor spacing above almost everything else. You accept defensive limitations at certain positions, if it means keeping the offensive system humming. The Fever did the opposite. They prioritized veteran presence and defensive versatility, then acted surprised when the offense stagnated in crucial moments.
I'm going to be pissed. Now, we saw here, and I had already put out a video that Caitlin Clark is back to 100%. So she's going to be looking to do damage this year. She's 100%, no injuries, none of that. She's going to be looking to do damage. We need to get the right people around her. I don't want to see under no circumstances should Natasha Howard be on this roster next season. It's no excuse for it. We don't have time for it. Natasha Howard needs to go on to another team and do her thing. Maybe go join an expansion team. I don't know.
And here's where it gets personal. Natasha Howard was one of the few players who stayed healthy throughout the entire 2024 season. At 33 years old, playing significant minutes, absorbing contact in the paint, She was remarkably durable. That's genuinely impressive and shouldn't be dismissed. In a season where the Fever dealt with multiple injuries that derailed their roster continuity, having a veteran forward available every single night had real value. But durability without production is just empty minutes. And production without fit is just individual statistics that don't translate to team success. The Fever needed someone who could stay on the court and make Caitlin Clark better. They got someone who stayed on the court and often made Caitlin Clark's job harder. Think about what Aliyah Boston went through this season. She's a legitimate post presence, someone who should be catching lobs and finishing around the rim at high efficiency. But she spent large portions of games standing at the three-point line because Natasha Howard was clogging the paint. Boston's usage rate dropped. Her efficiency suffered. And a huge part of that was roster construction forcing her into a role that didn't maximize her strengths. So let's talk about what the Fever should do this offseason. Because this isn't just about when Natasha Howard returns. This is about whether the front office has learned anything from the 2024 experiment. The name that keeps coming up in these discussions is Azurá Stevens from the Los Angeles Sparks. 6'6", can shoot the three ball, can protect the rim, can switch defensively. She's exactly the kind of modern stretch forward that unlocks everything Caitlin Clark does offensively. Stevens shot 37% from three during the 2023 season, before injuries limited her 2024 campaign. That's the profile you want: size, shooting, defensive versatility. Now acquiring Stevens won't be easy. She's under contract with the Sparks. Any trade would require giving up assets, probably draft picks, possibly young players. But this is where the Fever front office needs to ask themselves a fundamental question. Are we building to compete for championships? Or are we building to be respectable? Because respectable doesn't require bold moves. Championships do. Caitlin Clark just announced she's back to 100% health. No lingering injuries from the physical rookie season she endured. No off-season procedures needed. She's entering year 2 with a full training camp, complete familiarity with WNBA defenses, and the kind of motivation that comes from falling short in the playoffs. This is the window. This is when you go all in on surrounding her with the right pieces. And the right pieces doesn't mean the most accomplished resumes or the biggest names. It means players whose skills complement hers. It means shooters who can punish help defense. It means bigs who can finish lobs and set bone-crushing screens. It means guards who can defend at a high level, so Clark doesn't have to carry that burden. It means a power forward who understands that open threes are more valuable than contested mid-range jumpers. Natasha Howard is a 3-time WNBA champion. She's played on great teams, contributed to winning cultures, and earned respect throughout the league. None of that is in question. But championships aren't won by assembling collections of individually accomplished players. They're won by constructing rosters where every piece fits together, where strengths are maximized and weaknesses are hidden. The Fever tried to make this work for an entire season. They gave it a legitimate chance, and the results speak for themselves. An 18% three-point shooter, taking up a starting spot next to a point guard who creates open threes at historic rates. That's not a fit. That's not close to a fit. And running it back for another year would be organizational malpractice. Here's what makes this situation particularly awkward. Natasha Howard hasn't done anything wrong from a professionalism standpoint. She showed up every game. She played hard. She was durable. If she returns to Indiana, it won't be because she forced her way back or created drama. It'll be because the front office failed to make a difficult decision. And that's what this really comes down to. Does the Indiana Fever front office have the courage to admit the Natasha Howard experiment didn't work? Can they make the tough call to move on from a respected veteran, even if it means some uncomfortable conversations? Are they willing to prioritize fit over reputation? Because Caitlin Clark's window won't stay open forever. She's under contract through the 2028 season, which sounds like a long time until you remember how quickly WNBA careers can shift. Injuries happen, team dynamics change, windows close faster than anyone expects. The time to maximize this opportunity is right now in year 2. When Clark is healthy and motivated and ready to take the next step. Natasha Howard is getting her jersey retired by Florida State University, which is a tremendous honor and well-deserved recognition for everything she accomplished there. That's the kind of legacy moment that can help frame a transition. She can move on to an expansion team like Toronto, where she'd have a bigger role and more freedom to play her game. She can join a contender that needs veteran depth. She has options that make sense for her career, and the Fever can pursue the kind of forward who actually fits their system. Someone who makes Aliyah Boston better, not worse. Someone who makes Caitlin Clark's passes more dangerous, not less effective. Someone who understands that the best shot in basketball is an open three-pointer created by a generational playmaker. So when you see Natasha Howard's name connected to Caitlin Clark in headlines, don't panic. Understand that a charitable gesture in February doesn't dictate roster decisions in March. Appreciate that both players can be good people who simply don't fit together on a basketball court. And demand that your front office makes decisions based on winning championships, not avoiding difficult conversations. The Indiana Fever have a generational talent. They have a player who can change the entire trajectory of the franchise, but only if they surround her with the right piece, only if they prioritize fit over everything else, only if they learn from the mistakes of 2024 and refuse to repeat them in 2025. Under no circumstances should Natasha Howard be back on this roster next season. Not because she's a bad player, not because she's a bad person, but because the fit doesn't work. The numbers prove it doesn't work. And wasting another year of Caitlin Clark's prime would be unforgivable. The Fever need to move on. Natasha Howard needs to move on, and both sides will be better for it. So get down in the comments and tell me, would you bring Natasha Howard back? Or is it time for the Fever to find a true stretch four who can actually space the floor? Because this decision is going to define whether Indiana is serious about competing for championships, or just content with being competitive. And there's a massive difference between those two things.